Hi, I'm Paul Shepherd, your mindset coach, and welcome to the Mindset Change podcast, where you can be inspired and learn how to transform your mindset so you can create the life you truly want to live. Today, I'm talking to Zen Monk, coach and author of the classic book, The Zen Life Alex Mill, and he has just released a new book called A Shift to Love, which has had quite the impact on me as it really did challenge some beliefs I was holding on to. And welcome, Alex Mill.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. Congratulations on your new book, A Shift to Love. It's such a great book. It's changed a few things for me already. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect. And I listened to Zen Life, which I loved. And then I was reading A Shift to Love. And there's some really interesting concepts there that I really want to go through with you. But for anyone who's not listening, it'd be good to know how you became a Zen monk, as this is the whole idea of what your book is about. And it's quite drastic, it's quite a jump.
You're right. Yeah. So I was. So the story actually is in the book. So if I leave any details out, it's only because I want to make sure we get to talk about other things, because I can. That's a whole section in and of itself about how I ended up finding Zen. I would characterize myself as the person least likely to do something like leave everything I have and go train in a Zen monastery. I describe myself in the book, and this is true. I was just a regular person, just a artist who was living in a big city, and stumbled upon a book that was written by a Zen teacher. And I pulled it off the counter and started reading it. And my girlfriend at the time, she's the reason why I ended up going into the bookstore in the first place. I was tagging along and trying to stay out of trouble because I was skeptical about all of this new age. It was a new age bookstore I was in. And anyway, I started reading the book, and it was as though the person who was writing the book was standing inside of my own head. She was describing the process of having everything that you want in life and still being unhappy. And that's the situation that I certainly found myself in. It was as though the planets were completely in alignment. I had the perfect relationship, the perfect job, the perfect home. Everything should have equaled complete, utter contentment and happiness. And I suspect many other people can really relate to this too, this feeling of always the next thing. I always have to get the next thing, have the next experience, meet a new person, do all of these things. And so there was just this emptiness, this bottomless experience of just never enough. And that's what the author was talking about. And that's why I got sucked into it so heavily, is because I just couldn't put my finger on it. It was always this experience of walking around through life, but never really connecting or being a part of it. There was always this invisible barrier between me and everything that I was experiencing. And the dissatisfaction was the ultimate experience that I would say was the undercurrent. And I would have to say that I would never have described myself as unhappy. I wasn't depressed. Like I said, I had lots of friends having a good time. It was just that one thing that shifted me over to see life from a different perspective, that it's possible to have contentment, joy, peace, fulfillment with everything exactly the way that it is. And I was like, wow, I have to find out more about this. And so anyway, I'll cut to the chase. I ended up buying that book. I ended up buying a bunch of other books. That was my habit. I just collected anything that I was interested in. It was like, okay, if there was a record that I liked, I had to get everything that composer or artist put together. And it was just nonstop. And it would have been the same with this particular book had I not done one thing. And I was avoiding that one thing for a very long time, and that was meditation. It was
Yeah.
because it was so fascinating to read all of these things. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh my God, this is such brilliance. Why stop and do an exercise? Why stop and meditate? Why? Right? It was just, I was in the flow of just absorbing. But then after reading about 9 or 10 of these books, and every single one of them went into how important meditation was, I was like, okay, well, it's silly for me to be reading books about meditation and I actually meditate. So had I not meditated, I am pretty convinced that all of these books would have just found themselves into my enormous collection and
Yeah.
nothing would have been different about my life. But meditation was the thing that set off everything else that happened because the inner processes started to slow down. I started to get insights. The things that I was reading at the time started to click into place. And there were a lot of things that I still didn't have a hold of, didn't quite comprehend. And so I just dove in deeper. And then we were traveling cross country, my girlfriend and I. And so it just made sense for me to just check out a Zen monastery as one of the things that we do along the
As you
way.
do.
And
Just check
so
out a Zen
what I
monastery.
did, I know. I checked out a Zen monastery and just never left. That's the joke in my, everybody that knows me is.
I know.
So anyway, that's the abbreviated version of how it all happened. I go into a little bit more detail in the book
Mm.
itself.
No, the meditation side of things, I can relate to that. It's one of these things which, I've looked at for 30 years, and I paid token service to it. I did bits and pieces of it. And then, if I did it, it became a checklist. Oh, I've meditated for 5 to 10 minutes. Yes.
Sure.
It was, journaled for a little bit, did a bit of mindfulness. Yeah, I'm done. I'm all sorted. That'll make me a better person. It didn't even touch
Right.
the sides. It didn't touch the sides. And so, what do you think is our biggest resistance to meditation? Why do we struggle with it so much?
This, the voices in our heads. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and when I say voices, I don't mean this psychological thing where it's schizophrenia and anything like that. I just want to be really clear that, and I think several people who are now popular in the media, like Brene Brown and other mindfulness teachers, talk about gremlins and voices. And so anybody who's sat in silence for any period of time knows that there's chatter going on. There's an incessant undercurrent of self-talk, and it is the number one thing that is very much invisible to people until you actually start slowing things down and taking a look at it. Because we'll just say, "Oh, it's just me thinking.
Mm.
It's just me." So if I have a thought, it automatically belongs to me. I'm the author of it. It occurred in here, so it must be mine. And that's the best gift I think I've ever received in all of whatever it is that I have received in my time of training at the monastery and all the meditation is the understanding that whatever is going on in here doesn't necessarily belong to me. I'm not the author of it. Oftentimes it is like downloaded, actually, to use technological term. It's something that comes in and is speaking to me. And it's not only the biggest resistance to meditation, but resistance in general to anything else in life. So if you've ever wanted to do something really badly, or even not so badly, just you want to do something, and you find that you are unable to, there is a high likelihood that it's because this is setting you up to perhaps desire that thing, and then coming in with a whole bunch of resistance about how you can't have that. I run into this all the time. People want to change their lives, do something good for themselves. And then the minute that there's an opportunity for that to happen, anything and everything will come in. I don't have time. I'll do it later. There's not enough money. It won't work for me. Who knows what this person is really about? That I might just get taken advantage of. And it's really this is the thing that is creating the barrier. And so, as I started to say, if you ever wanted to do something and you can't do it, and there's something that you don't want to do and can't seem to stop, that is that is our relationship with the voices. I want everybody that is listening to this to know that there is a way to shift that around, to turn that in the opposite
Mhm.
direction, so that there is a way to volitionally create your life and do something different than the automatic pilot of what feels like being out of control and not being able to have say in creating a deliberate and conscious, compassionate life. So that is the biggest resistance to meditation. Um,
Yeah. So
and
where do
it'll
these
show up lots of different ways. You know?
they do? Oh, I really
Go ahead.
loved.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
I loved your analogy in the book of the chocolate cake, and it's the voices,
Yes,
the voices. We've all been there. The voices tell you to have the chocolate cake, then you have the chocolate cake, and then
that's
it
right.
kicks your ass for having the chocolate cake. You get berated, the guilt and
That's
the
right.
shame.
Yeah,
You lose there. You've like where was your willpower? It's but where do these voices come
that's
from?
right.
Where it's is this something from outside of ourselves? Is it something inside of ourselves? What is this voice?
Yeah. So the way we talked about it at the monastery is that human beings have a unique um, situation in life because, as far as we can tell, we're the ones who are the ones that struggle with this thing. It's the ability to experience ourselves as separate from life, to have this internal dialogue going on, and it. You know, I don't want any of what I say to be taken as the truth. It's
Mhm.
more of my experience seems to match to what we're talking about, what I've learned. And so I encourage everyone to not assume that I understand, this is what's going on and
Okay.
this is how it all works. But um, I want people to find out for themselves the truth of that, and then see if there's something they want to do differently. But as we're growing up, and maybe people can really relate to this, is that um, as a child, the process of socialization can be rather traumatic or difficult or hard. And I don't care how loving of a family you've come from, the interpretation that the infant or the child growing up has, it will be whatever it is that that it is. So even if you're loving, there's something that's going to happen that is going to be something unpleasant for the child. And I don't want adults hearing this who are happen to be parents or teachers or anyone that's in contact with children to be crippled or paralyzed with, oh, I can't do anything to traumatize the child. My teacher would say, it's a given that this is going to happen, that the child will
Yeah.
be socialized and you will traumatize it, to do it in a way that is most comfortable for you. Uh, um, and so as we are growing up, we start splintering off. These different survival systems start being created. And the voice is originally designed to do something like look out for our survival. Uh, don't trust this, don't do that, don't touch that, don't, right? So you are a loser if you have that cake, right? So something along the way set up a dynamic to watch over us and to put us in line whenever whenever we stray. And in my experience, we're still carrying that around, and it is the undercurrent of our identity. It's like everything just starts building and building and building, and pretty soon the child that reaches about 6 or 7 has an entire wall around it that it is now relating to instead of life. It's like trusting the inner knowing or the spontaneity or that freshness to life starts to disappear, and referencing the voice to see how am I fitting in, am I surviving, am I doing the right thing, uh, kicks in. And it is pretty much been in charge of our lives since we had language, so since we were able to actually um, move about and do things in life. And that's why it's so challenging, and why I want people to approach this process, if they plan on doing this, with as much patience and kindness and compassion and understanding as possible, because it has all of these years of the voices they have all of these years of controlling us and being the authority that we reference constantly. And so it's important to realize that you're not going to just sit down and meditate a few times or read something inspirational, and then everything is going to suddenly change for you. That's not my experience of how it works. It is an ever evolving process. It's a practice and it's a joyful one, because once you actually see the distinction between what the voices are versus what's left when they're not. This is why I like to talk about it. Zen has this kind of negative thing, right? But it's the negative of no voices and what's left when they're gone. Okay. There's a distinction between those two experiences that is very powerful. And in Zen, it's all about the awareness. So it's so tricky to work with people that I coach and people that are students in the retreat, because there's this autopilot of, I need to fix, I need to improve, I need to change, I need to get self-improve, I need to do something to change this all. And that's going to be running in the background of the awareness that we're simply bringing to the process. Because my point around all of this is that awareness is the thing that actually shifts everything around. It's finally seeing how it all works. It's like opening up the hood of a car and looking at all of, if you're not a mechanic or you're not mechanically inclined, then that experience is what it is. It's like, oh my God, that's what people's experience is when they first start to do this work. It's like, whoa. But the process of practice is seeing how it all goes together and the function and how it works. And once you see how it all works and you become masterful at this, like a mechanic would be, then it's like, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. And It's not the fact that their person is working really hard at this point to figure out how it's all going. It's that it's like a map. It's all there. And that's where we're going with, if we're going anywhere with this practice, it is that place of not ever being confused about how it all goes together. And it's going to take consistent practice to get to this place. And I hate to say it as a place, because it's not really this arrival thing. Buddha practiced till he died, because there's always some level of how this works to see through and to keep practicing with. So anyway, I hope I answered your question. I don't even know what it was at this point.
You did. I'm going to agree a little bit more. No, I was meditating the other day, and I tell it to my clients, and I was just sat there, and this little voice said, "How much time you got left?" And I could feel this little pressure build up in my chest. It's in to say, "Ooh, we've not got enough time for this." And that's an old program. And it was nice for it to pop up, because it was just a reminder that I used to rush. It was always about trying to get things done, tick boxes. So it was just a little reflection of that. And Sorry.
I'm sorry. Something that occurs to me is that the way it all works is really, really super subtle. So an awareness of time in this example that you give could be like something that is asking you to pay attention to something that may have slipped through, right? It's kind of like I use the analogy of walking out the door, and then the insight of keys pops in. It's like, oh yeah, I need keys if I'm going to go drive, so I better go get the keys. So for me, the one word or the quick impulse, the thing that says time goes, oh, that's really helpful. It's the process that happens right on the heels of that. It's like, oh my God, you need to panic, right? Or you're not going to have time, and therefore things are going to go awfully wrong. That's where it cascades into Voicesville, right? The ability that we have at that crossroads is using an insight like time to help us now prioritize and actually because there's a way to proactively use that information,
Yeah.
as well as go into outright panic. And did you see what I mean? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's something that happens in lots of different circumstances, right? And so there are lots of little steps along the way that are really helpful to see. And what I like to do with the folks that are practicing with me is to start to break down how can we use this instead of it using us. And that's when it all starts to really turn around.
So it comes back to something else you said in your book. We're talking about working with the mind. You said in your book, the state of the world is a mirror for the state of our minds. What would someone reading that think? Because a basic question would be, how am I responsible for the war, disease, and climate change? I think I know what you mean, but what would you say to someone who's saying, "Hang on a
Uh-huh.
second, I'm not responsible for how I see the world"? Surely.
Yeah, there are several layers to that. The first layer is the layer of we are we are responsible for our experience of life. In that, um, it's kind of like the analogy of opening a window and seeing snow falling. And I don't know if you've heard this before, if this metaphor has been used elsewhere, but to the person who doesn't really like snow, it's um, the story is I'm not going to be able to go where I need to go. I'm going to have my car. I have to clean my car off. I need to. It's ruined all my plans. To the person who loves snow, it's like, oh wow, I get to go make a snow person. I get to go hiking in the snow. I get to go skiing. And so, what's the reality really? It's so the and I'm not suggesting that war, famine, and all of these other things are just a figment of like, well, you could see the positive. I'm not trying to put a
Mm.
spin on any of this, that it's like these things aren't going on. But our experience, very much like what I was saying earlier about, the thing that drops in about time, it's like it's very neutral. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's actually something that's trying to bring your awareness to something that may have slipped by. And the story that gets downloaded that debilitates us is the thing that we are trying to address, right? So what I see is a lot of good people in the world get downloaded all of these things to be terrified in the world, but there is nothing that is proactive about any of it. Do you see what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's helpful if you are going to do something to assist with climate change. If you are going to assist with wars if you are going to do something
Mm.
proactive to shift it. See, this is where the responsibility lies. Like, so I'm trying to get people out of the suffering element of it, because you suffering over the suffering of the world helps nobody. All it does is just add one more suffering person to the pile. And
100%.
it may seem like, yeah, it may seem like it's
Yeah.
the responsible thing to do, to care. Like, I care, therefore I have all of these opinions of how bad this is and how bad that is. But having all of those opinions doesn't feed a child, doesn't stop a war, doesn't change the climate. So there's that element of it. Okay, so that's that layer. And what I want to help when I work with people is shift them into being debilitated by the voices to being empowered by what the goodness and the compassion and the kindness and the force that animates can go out there and actually be a force for good. So that's what I mean. And so I don't want the voices to go, you're now responsible, like, and then beat you for, you created all of this. No, no, no. The voices would love to put you in that place, right? You feel bad about it. I run into enough people who are like, oh, I'm traumatized by all of the animals that are being killed and harmed in the world. I'm like, okay, good. Let's use that. Let's flip that. Instead of you being tortured, what's one small thing you can do to start moving your care of animals in the direction of, or the environment, or social justice, or whatever it is. to something that would be good. And so the other layer that I was referring to was I'm going to see if I can phrase this in a way that makes it clear. Conditioned mind operates in something wrong, not enough, and so oftentimes we are completely unaware of how we are a contribution to the things that are that the world is the mirror of the contents of our mind is this. And there's a passage in the book that I call Stream of Conscious Noise Pollution. And it's a small habit that we have, but it's one that when we get together and socialize, we'll tend to talk about things. And we tend to talk about things randomly. And it's oftentimes based in what's wrong with the world, what's not working, who's doing this and who's doing that. And so I don't think a lot of people are aware of how much that undercurrent actually shapes how they start acting and behaving in the world. And even though my actions are not to the degree of what atrocities are happening in the world, they do have their kernel in the way that they're showing up in, we used to talk about it as, thought, emotion, behavior, and then action, right? The actions that I take out in the world. And then those start to shape the reality. And you have enough people who are participating in this, and voila, we have the world as it is right now. And so, our relationship, our ability to experience ourselves as separate with the voices of egocentricity is our greatest opportunity, both personally and for the survival of everyone and everything on the planet. And so it is our responsibility to a degree to turn this around, because as we can see what's going on in the world, it's going to really require us to shift out of where we have been and shift to what we have the possibility of becoming and living and breathing. And so it's always heart opening for me to see another person who has done the work and taken the shift and out of just intellectually understanding it to taking steps to first transform themselves, and along the way transform those that are closest to them, and then beautifully ripple out as far as we can possibly go, because it doesn't practice doesn't end with us. This is going to the bodhisattva idea, right? The person who has awakened doesn't just hang out under a tree and be awakened. That person goes back out into the market and actually makes an impact on everyone else around them. So save all sentient beings. That's really what that's all about. Is I'm not going to just focus on how I benefited, because that's really, when you start off, it's just like, I just want peace. I just want calm. I just want happiness for myself. And, that's great, because if you're starving, feed yourself first. It's the oxygen mask falls down, put it on your face first. Definitely. And there's more. There's more to do. We have to roll up our sleeves, we have to get out there and that's why I felt when, with the book and everything that I've done since I've left the monastery is giving back with the same coin that I have been given. It's like, look, I've been given all of this great teaching and experiences and practices and tools. Now is my way to go back out into the world and see how can I offer this in a way that makes it available to others should they choose to want it for themselves. And it's not easy. It's fun, challenging, daunting, rewarding, all of these things, but it takes a certain level of commitment and seriousness to the process. And at the very beginning, it can be very, very much like being shaken up and thrown into a room, and which is what Zen monks had to endure when they first got into a monastery. It was like,
Wow.
are you ready for this? And they would be
Yeah.
shaken up, and would ask several times, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And it was all through action. So anyway,
Yeah.
I could talk
No.
endlessly about
Yeah.
all this stuff.
No.
It's so much fun.
I think again, it's one of the things that I like to promote. I've talked about it on the podcast, and I talk about it with my clients. Is if we can become the best versions of ourselves and develop a really healthy relationship with ourselves, then we have time for other people around us. Well, it's like a ripple. We can have an effect on the people around us,
Yes,
and that spreads out. But if we don't have time for ourselves, caring for other people and caring for the planet seems so hard. And I think that's where, that's what
that's
I
right.
see a lot of. I think people are really struggling to develop that relationship with themselves. And I think your book is a great point, a great pointer at, go within. And, I talk about it on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I do meditations on my show. People who come to work with me, as they would come to
Nice.
work with you, it's not about the outside goals. I mean, they're great, go for them, but it's who you become along the way that is the biggest gift that keeps on giving, in my view. But you also have an impact on the other people
That's
around you at
right.
the same time. It's a win-win.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's and I love how you put it that way, because it is a parallel track. It is not like um I hear so much about love yourself first before you love others. I don't have a time sequence with this. As you
Mm.
begin to fill the cup, it will start overflowing, and at that point, other people are brought into that all. Uh, but if it stays empty, like the way that I described it, as this bottomless hole, it just keeps pouring and pouring and pouring, and if there's nothing, no place to receive it, no, because people do. They'll say, I don't know if you've been in this position before, but they give compliments, they love on you and all,
Mm.
and it just completely will go, oh, they're just saying that, or that's not true, or I'm so unlovable. So if there's no place for it to land and be received and to start to fill up if that vessel has a hole in it, a bottomless hole like I described myself having, then yeah, no amount of anything will make a difference. And so that's why all of the things that we try to achieve in the world is in service to giving us the experience of fulfillment. And that's why none of them actually fulfills, because it is bottomless. It's like the car
Mm.
falls in, the person falls in, the new job falls in. I write a book, it just falls in. And then afterwards, it's like, God, I feel so depleted. Why? Why? I just finished. I just got this. I got this. It's like maybe for a couple of days the new car will be shiny, and then after a while, it's like, okay, well, next, right?
Yeah.
And
Why am I
so
not happy? Where's the
what we're
happiness? I
looking
thought I
for
was
is
going to be happy.
right. I was supposed to have happiness as a result of this, and that's not really where it is. And so, yeah, it's very important for us to do this parallel track of, and it's just going to happen. It's not one of those things where, see, when people say think of other people and do service and all of these things, sometimes that is an avenue to opening us up
Mm.
to that kind of care and that ability, but not 100%, not necessarily. And so, because sometimes it's a way of avoiding ourselves. You know what I mean? It's like we're not doing any work, we're just sacrificing ourselves. And I run into this a lot of times with mothers, right? It's like, I'll do anything for my child. I have no time for myself, I have no ability to care for any of these things. And so what the children get is sacrificing yourself for others is what you're supposed to do. And
Yeah, that's a powerful message. They're out
there is a
there.
way,
There's
right?
something.
Well, there is
Yeah.
a way to have it all. And that's what I'm trying to
Mm.
do with folks, is see that you can, as you start to focus on how it is that you leave for this to care for others without caring for yourself, how the voices tell you that one way is better than another, you'll start to take actions for yourself and others around you, and you become a model of somebody who can give and receive, right? And so the wheel is complete, because what you want is, you want to understand that what I want from my child is who I am being. So if you want sacrificing everything and being miserable along the way for others, then keep doing that. If you want, however, someone who is modeling, I'm not perfect, I'm doing my best, I'm practicing with everything that is arising for me, I'm going up against whole year, like generations of doing things in a way that has been unhelpful and hurtful, and I'm cleaning it up. That's my responsibility. I'm taking back to what we were talking about, responsibility. Zen is a process of cleaning up that karma, personally and universally along the way, taking responsibility for it, um, so that we just work our way to get to a place where where we're tidying up everything that we've touched, or has been touched even before us, so that we can leave something good for others, our
Yeah.
children and the planet.
So the voices, just to clarify things. So we've got the voices which are, I call it
Sure.
primal hypnotic conditioning, and but we've got
Oh,
a light
yeah.
we've got a light side. We've got a part of us that really wants the good stuff. We've got a part of us that encourages people to listen to a podcast, to they come and have coaching with you or read your book. So how do we develop the other part of us that's the light side? Is our light side and dark side? How does it work?
Oh, the light room. Yeah, the light room versus the dark room. And so I referred to it earlier as the voices and what's left when we're not in relationship
Yeah.
to the voices. It's really important to, um, when you say develop, it's one of those funny, not funny, haha, but ironic situations where um, the work that I encourage people to do, I don't know if this is what everybody else does as well. So I apologize. I'm not really familiar with what a lot of folks do with people around, um, this concept of a better self, the part of us who wants to do good and all that, and how to develop that. Um, my experience seeing how the voices do what they do to keep us away from that, I have this notion that that's what's there. That's underneath everything else. That's that gets revealed as we start to see through how the voices work. And so it's not how can I be a better human being. It's how can I see through what keeps me from being the human being that I would be
Okay.
if I stopped relating to the voices that are stopping me. You see, because it's like, and people will discover this along the way in the process of doing the practice. They will start to see um, little areas in which they weren't in relationship with the voices, and they've often done these really heroic things. Like I've moved to a new location, I started a relationship, I did all these really amazing transitions that required bravery and courage and an open heart, and so sometimes things that happen to us in life open that up for us to be able to access, where this isn't, oftentimes in emergencies, where, people come together after a tragedy and then just, the goodness just emerges. I just rush to save the person who is falling from or drowning in or whatever. And then what happens is this starts closing back in again. And we're in relationship to that. And it's a feeling of constantly trying to get back to this baseline of being open to life that way, being excited about life that way. So my encouragement would be to do everything you can to practice seeing through those voices and get back to that baseline. And then it's a matter of practicing your relationship with the opposite, with um, compassionate self-mentoring, right?
Mhm.
Um, to develop that relationship of, so let's face it, I don't know about you, but before practice, my relationship to myself was not this kind of like supportive environment. I wouldn't call my experience inside of myself a supportive environment, like looking out for my best interest, making sure I was eating well, sleeping well, taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, encouraging myself to perform better or learn better or all of these things that we really wish we had as we were growing up, to have that kind of
Yeah.
internal system set up for ourselves. And so that's the practice that we are cultivating. Once it's actually not separate. It's not like get rid of voices, work on relationship with yourself. It is that parallel track that I was referring to earlier. They go hand in hand together. And so I hope I answered your question around how do we cultivate that
Yeah,
part.
it's well, I mean,
It's really about seeing.
cultivating that mentor inside of us, because it's funny, isn't it? When I talk to parents, they would love to be like that with their children, and they are, and they're really encouraging and
Yeah,
supportive, and it's wonderful. But when it comes to themselves, they have this angry, derogatory voice that can be quite shaming. And
sure.
I had that for quite a long time.
Yes.
It was I had an anxiety disorder, and I was so angry with myself for failing to sort it out by myself.
Mm,
And it was something I've come through, and
mm.
it's why I do what I do now. So that was my, I'm fulfilling
Good.
my purpose. This is the thing that I talk about the most. And it's so again, it's so what I really like is that, so you're not trying to get rid of the dark side. You're not trying to get to grow the
Mm.
light side. You're trying to, it's a parallel seeing through and just in developing a better relationship with
It's an
yourself.
awareness
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, it's an awareness practice. It's like my favorite analogy is when you're in a dark room, you can't see anything, and you imagine that there's a hole in this dark room, and you keep walking and you keep falling into it. You keep stumbling, and that's us with this social conditioning stuff. Is that the room is dark and we keep stumbling and falling into it, and that's because it's a complete we don't see it coming. It's a mystery. We live in this kind of constant fear of it. But when the lights get turned on, you start to see it, and you don't have to become a better person. You don't have to work really hard at not falling into the hole. It's like the hole is there, and when you see it, you just stop falling into it. You just stop going along with it. And same is true with the voices, but we have to detangle them to a certain extent because we've confused them to be us, right? So,
Yes.
even the expression I would beat myself up, I would be harsh and critical toward myself, that those are not true statements at all. That is not how it's worked. That's not how it works. And so, but it's a habit that's ingrained in us that
Mm.
we keep carrying with us, and it's a misunderstanding. And see, that misunderstanding, once you see it for what it is, that changes everything. And once that changes everything, then you have the ability to grow whatever it is that you want. Um, because at the beginning, I'll have to confess, people who are doing the work with me, they'll focus a lot of their time on the voices. I saw this at the monastery too. It's almost like this fascination with them.
Mhm.
They're like, "Ooh, I gotta, we gotta, this is how I'm battling the voices today." And it's like, look, where we're really heading toward is the life that we can start choosing when we've seen through and are now able to choose something different than the voices. And it's such a foreign concept to people to wake up and focus on the thing that they're going to make, that's going to make the biggest contribution to themselves, others around themselves, and the world, because that's the vacuum that's created once we start seeing through the voices. Is like, I don't know, I see through a voice. What am I going to do now? And it's so easy to revert back to um, some version of the way the voices tortured them before, like
Mm.
taking on a project and immersing themselves in it and having the same, like, being burned out from all of the work that's involved in that. And so it's a tricky place, and that's why I encourage everyone to have somebody who has more experience than them to help guide them along the way. That's the gift that I had when I was training as people who are doing the work alongside of me. We're all doing the same thing. We had a teacher who was able to see through the snares and traps that we would fall into, and then guide. That's why she was called the guide, to guide us back to where we knew we wanted to live. And what happens is, just as we practice, we start to stumble along and go, oh well, that's not it. Maybe we got back over here. Maybe back over here. So I just find it really helpful, and that's why I don't encourage anyone to take this on alone. You'll see people who say things like, I am my own guru. And as lovely as that sounds, because it comes from the concept of, yourself better than anyone else in the world. And what people don't realize is that the yourself we're talking about is the part that is a complete and utter mystery to them. So until you understand the relationship between the voices and what's left when there aren't any, the guidance you're oftentimes likely receiving as your own guru could be this. And so the guide is not telling you right and wrong, go this way or go that way. The guide is simply shining a light on the inner processes that are going on so that you see them for what they are. And then you can be your own guru with wisdom and understanding about the distinction between the voices versus that inner mentor. I'm sorry, just a little bit of tangent, but I think that's really important to.
Yeah, it is. It is very important, and it reminds me. I think the biggest ever revelation I ever had, and it took me a while to understand it, was that the thoughts in my head were not real. The voices in my head were not real. My attachment to them, and I never got that. It took me a while to get it. I was like, "What do you mean? I'm thinking it, so it must be real." I couldn't separate the two. And then
when
I had that moment,
it is real. We experience.
Yeah, but the thought itself.
No, I just wanted to say that I don't want to diminish. I don't want to diminish what other people are experiencing. Yes, they're completely made up. They are, like I said before, they're just downloaded into us. The shift that happens is like the hole that was invisible before the lights came on, is that we don't have to believe them any longer. That's really where we're going with them.
It was that bit.
Is that they don't go away. Yeah.
It was that bit that when I realized I didn't have to believe my thoughts, it was the biggest weight off my shoulders. I was just like, what? Really?
Absolutely.
And, I remember crying. I remember thinking, what? But when I had that I finally got it. It made such a big difference to me. And that's something that I see you must see that with clients today. It's that realization that you don't have, they are options. There might be a good option, but you have the ability to filter out whether it's a useful thought or not.
Correct. Yeah. And it's like, it just becomes apparent. It's like we used to joke around at the monastery. It'd be so powerful. It'd be so convenient if whenever we succumb to the voices, we turn blue, because then we would know there would be some kind of evidence that, oh, okay, going the wrong way, going in a way that's unhelpful, but we don't. And so we have to do the practice to become aware of the distinction between them. And so, but it's an ongoing thing because it's really subtle. And I think until people have an experience of it, these are just concepts that are just fun to understand, because I have a whole group of people who are following a movement of, if it feels good, then it must be right. If there's resistance to it, it must be wrong. And I mean, I get it that it sounds lovely. You're frowning, you're going like, because I suspect that you're probably tapping into what's going on for me around it, is that, look, anytime you want to do something that is going to be powerfully helpful to you, there's going to be a whole lot of resistance to doing that. Absolutely. And the voices may allow you to be able to do it for a few days, but I'm telling you, the minute you start to turn things around for yourself, they are certainly going to come in with a boatload of resistance. And so I'm not a fan of it's got to be easy, it's got to be natural, it's got to be
No.
free flowing, because I just know how much this gets in the way of doing anything really dramatically different that's positive for somebody. So anyway, that's my
No,
spiel
I agree
about
with you. I don't think there's much fruit on a barren, empty path. I think it's very tempting to take the flat road, but I've never seen, we don't grow that much. I did a podcast episode called "Is Your Average
no.
Life Making You Anxious?" And it was all about that growth. The best forms of growth that we've all had, in my view, is when we've been challenged and when we've overcome
Yeah,
something and we've grown from that experience. And we won't get that if we try and keep,
correct.
to a familiar zone. I wanted to ask you about something
That's right.
because you challenged me in your book quite nicely. So I talk about
Oh,
don't compare yourself to other people, and in your book, you're like, hang on a sec. So I wanted to ask you about, you talk about judgment and comparison. It was in one lovely section of your book, and I wanted to just to get your
sure.
explanation on that because it really did make me think. Hang on, he's got a good point. So can you talk a little bit further about that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're referring to is there's such a concept as judgment and perfectionism and all of these other words that, in the spiritual world and in the personal development world and comparison and things like that, that are kind of like, they're taboo. They're like, no, stop doing that.
Mm.
Stop, because they're often associated with our relationship with the voices. So on one level, yeah, it's back to the responsibility that we have with the world. It's not that these things don't exist. It's that where we tend to go with them, or where the voices in our head tend to go with them, is a place that is completely unhelpful. So comparison comes in. Okay, I'm this way, that person's that way. And what the voices try to do is, you're less than, that person's greater than. Or it could be the other way around. You're better than
Yeah,
and they're less than. And that creates a whole different level of suffering for an individual too, right? So I don't want to ever minimize. I don't want people who are on the high end of the comparison or the judgment or the whatever, the perfectionism, to feel like they're exempt from any kind of suffering. And it's that experience of being separate that is the part that causes us to suffer and have dissatisfaction and separation. But that's the path that we are on constantly, is that in this moment, I am the person who has the ability to choose between the light room and the dark room. And so, whatever content comes through. So, if it's comparison, okay, well, I could either use that comparison to help me, or I could use that comparison, or the voices use that comparison to cripple me and throw me into suffering around that. So, that's where we are in every single moment, is this choice place. And I like to, back to what I was saying earlier, I like to create a situation in which people are empowered by that moment. This is why meditation
mm.
is so important as well. I'll just throw in a plug again back to meditation where we started, is that what you're doing in meditation is learning how to direct your attention. Okay. And so it's over and over again. My attention wanders, I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing it back. And this is why mindfulness meditation, just to be specific, is so important, is because that's what we're attempting to do in that kind of meditation, is notice that our attention is not here, bringing it back. And when we have that ability, then we get to this crossroads in every moment in life, and we have the ability to bring it back and go, okay, which direction would I like to choose? And if our attention is habitually wandering this way and that, it's easy for the voices to latch onto that and direct us and guide us along wherever it wants to go. So it's really important. These are like these little foundational steps that I think people can start to take. There's one action you can take: learn Zen meditation or mindfulness based meditation to direct your attention to where you want it to be. Then the rest of the work that I offer is about, okay, now that your attention is here and you're practicing bringing it here, what do you do? Because people get off the cushion. They think that The experience of meditation was it in it of itself. It's like an experience, like going to a spa or massage. And then once I'm done meditating, I get back out in my life and listen to the voices constantly. No, you keep bringing it back and you keep living this way and you keep making deliberate choices in every moment. And that's when judgment becomes very useful. Okay, judgment. How's that occurring? What is that in service to? How can this be helpful? Right? Same as comparison or perfectionism. I think I used the example of perfectionism in the book. When has perfectionism been helpful to you? And then people will rattle off, oh, well, it's when I was studying for my exam. I got everything that I needed. I checked all the boxes. I followed the recipe thoroughly. I did all these things as perfectly as I could. And the quality was enormous because of that. Good. And when has perfectionism been harmful to you? Well, they list all that off too. It stopped me from actually doing the thing that I wanted to do. It prohibited me from. And when you start to see through how those processes are different, you realize that when perfectionism has been unhelpful, is because this was talking you into experiencing fear of things that could happen in the future, and dread about the comparison about what happened in the past. And in the other times, it's been that moment where it's shown through who you authentically are. It's like being able to choose that part of you who is able to do things in a way that is masterful and skillful, that allowed perfectionism to arise. That is that's a snapshot of what it's like to live one way and what it's like to live the other way. And that's why I don't like to talk about these ambiguous concepts, because taken out of context, it depends, right? Are you choosing this path? Or are you choosing that path? Another metaphor I like to give is being generous. We often think that's a really positive thing that everybody should do. See somebody giving money to a homeless person, and we don't really understand what is going on inside of the person. A person could be doing this out of guilt, to look good in front of others, to get somebody away from them as quickly as possible. Or it could be, I really want to help. I care about this person. That inner experience is only available to the person doing that. But if that person is doing spiritual practice, or the practice that I learned when I was training, that becomes everything. You get to go through life going, how do I do this? How do I do that? What's going on for me honestly with this? What's going on for me honestly around that? That's why practice becomes this really fun thing that we do. That it's like a game. It's like the best game in town, really.
I think it's you're washing your dishes. Yeah, I did. You talked about the mind, using mindfulness to wash dishes, but you talked about it in a way which just really sort of struck home in regards to just the way that because some people obviously see it as a chore, and some people, could focus on each soap sud, but you had a different thought about it.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. It blipped out a little bit. You asked a question around it. What was it?
Yeah, the question was, could you just remind me of how you process doing a chore like washing dishes in a mindful way?
How I process doing a chore like well, it's like it's an extension of what we've been talking about. Is like, am I choosing the voices or the story that's going on for me around it, or am I choosing to actually be in the experience of it? We watch children. If you watch children, or you watch animals, dogs, they don't have a lot of this stuff that we have around it. Like, especially the younger the child, because again, like I said, conditioning sets in at a certain age, and then it's like, I don't want to, right? But a child, it will oftentimes just spontaneously be like really true to whatever is going on with them around whatever experience is there. If they're displeased, they'll be completely displeased. If they're joyful, or if this is a fun, interesting experience, it's the adults that project all of this stuff onto them that shapes how they relate to it later, right? So we create dividing lines between this is work versus this is fun. This is for them. This is for me. And they're artificial, like talk about, how the voices are completely make believe. All of these lines in the sand, as I like to call them, these are the places where the voices have drawn for us in our lives. I am like this. I am not like that. And powerful exercises for people to do, because what we're doing is realizing we ain't none of this. Okay. So the very interesting concept from Buddhism is that there is no self. Everybody's like, who am I authentically? Well, the truth is there ain't nobody, right? Who you are is what's created in the moment. And oftentimes the voices create that for us through all of these distinctions, these lines in the sand that they've drawn for us, right? I like this, I don't like that. I believe
Mm.
this, I don't believe that. This is good, this is bad. This is right, this is wrong. And we live in relationship to all of those without ever questioning them, or actually even going, where did that come from? Do I really feel that way? Or not even being able to be open to something different. And so um, we get down to something like a chore, like washing dishes. It becomes a game in and of itself to go, okay, well, what's arising? And I'm not suggesting that we go, voices, just like, I want everything that people experience in life to be an opportunity to mirror for them where they're kept stuck and enslaved, and how, like, why do I like this? Why do I don't like that? Just being curious. That's what's involved in this whole process
Mm.
of doing spiritual practice, is being immensely curious. A lot of people approach it as something more to know and understand and know as truth, like the closed fist approach, like, oh, this is it, this is right. And I'm constantly like, no, open that up. You have no clue, I have no clue. Let's explore it. I'll shine a light over here. If that does anything for you, go there or go here. It is constantly, always. This is why any great spiritual teacher will always instead of giving you answers to your questions, question your answers. you know,
I
just
think, yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
just go, yeah, I don't know. We'll go find out.
I think that's so
Anyway.
refreshing. So refreshing. We could talk forever, literally. There's so many things I haven't still
Oh,
asked
I
you
know
yet.
we
Maybe
can.
you'll have to come back. But I just wanted to, as we're beginning to wrap up, just so you do coaching and retreats. Where can people find out more about if they wanted to work with you, Alex? Where can they find out details of how to contact you and find out more about what you offer
Sure.
as a coach, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a website. It's currently Zen Life. Zen Life is all one word, and it's .coach, not com. So it's
Okay.
.coach. If they go there, everything that I offer currently will be there. The book is there too. So if people are interested there, the next step after the book, of course, my recommendation would be to do the meditation workshop. And then I've put together 3 30-day online programs that involve coaching with me. They're intensive deep dives, and they're meant to be done in your life with whatever is going on currently. They're called retreats, not as something where you have to put special time aside and be retreating. They're called retreats because they're very interactive, they're engaged, but they don't take all of your time for the day. For instance, it's 20 to 40 minutes max that you would be spending per day. But in
Okay.
my experience, what I find is that process of showing up day after day after day, that's what starts to make the transformation for people. So I want people to know that there is a way that they can begin, and that there's a where to go with this. That it would there's, if you want to go deeper, if you really want to be free and experience inner peace and that kind of thing as a way of living, there is a process for doing that. So that was my mission
Wonderful.
when I left the monastery, was how can I make this work available here now, with what people have going on in their lives, so they don't have to travel to some distant monastery at the end of a dirt road in the middle of nowhere and practice for years on end like I did.
Amazing. So I'm going to put your details in the show notes. So if you are interested in contacting Alex for his retreats and to buy his book, everything will be within the show notes, and all you've got to do is click that there. Alex, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I hope you come back and we can talk more about just so many things I've not asked you. But yeah, good luck with the book
please,
as well.
Invite me back.
Yeah, you'll be coming back. Good luck with the book. Honestly, it's such a good read. So please do have a look on Amazon for all good booksellers. A Shift to Love. It's really worth reading. And also check out Zen Life as well. That was how I found Alex. And then I had to go and get the sequel. But there's so much more to you. Anyway, but thank you so much for today.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. I so appreciate you inviting me. And yes, you have complete control over whether I come back on again or not. I'll say yes.
Thanks very much.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
I really did enjoy interviewing Alex. Thank you so much for listening to this interview. Alex has also kindly agreed to do a mini meditation episode so you can experience a Zen meditation for yourself. Look out for it in the next episode. Now, I wonder what you'll be doing differently when it comes to those voices inside your head. Will you be attached, or will you step back and observe and decide to do something else? Whatever happens, I hope you have a wonderful day.